I've completely forgotten my mic, and so I'm using the inbuilt mic from this camera, and hopefully it will do its job. It's a lovely sunny day, even though it's getting colder in the UK and we're approaching a very late winter thanks to global warming, but it's a nice breeze and I like this kind of weather. So what do I want to talk about today? So, self-concept. Why self-concept is so important when manifesting your desires. Why it's an important foundation to have when you are building a house, and I'm sure this is something you might have heard a lot. When you are building a house, you do not lay the brickwork on cheap material if you could avoid it. You want it to be strong and solid, so then when you build on top of it, it lasts, it holds, you're safe, and you have a home. And that is what you need to have as a strong sense of identity, knowing exactly who you want to be, knowing who you are first, to then know who you want to be, and maybe the multiple identities that you want to be, and have it serve you at different times. I really discourage the idea of trying to manifest external things outside of you for the sake of those external things. Now, I don't mean it in terms of like to neglect your desires. I mean it so in a way that we obviously want to experience these things physically, and so we have such desires in the first place. We are here to have that human physical experience. But when I say to not put all your attention out into the physical world, there's a balance to it, and it's also knowing that it all starts from within. As within, so without is what I hear a lot, but it's knowing that you've already had it within your imagination. The ability to form an idea in your mind first is so often neglected, overrated. We oversee it so easily. Let's walk here. We oversee this so easily, when really that's where our true internal power lies. When you think, lighting's really bad. When you think of, stay here. When you think of an idea first, it starts off as an idea, but it had to have had a formless substance first. It couldn't have just come straight into the physical reality instantly. And like I said, we often neglect that. You have to see it in your head first. And I don't mean it as just an idea where you're physically trying to produce something. I mean it as in, before you even have perceptions of people, we always have stereotypes, judgments, and how many times have we had an argument with a person in our head before it could have ever actually happened, but then it ends up happening because we had a predetermined set of beliefs that we had the free will to choose. And so we would play out those scenarios in the shower or when we're doing something and our thoughts are bypassing. Even stuff like that, it all starts inside with ideas within the imagination. So where does self-concept relate into this? Well, the fact that we are gravitating towards thinking a certain way with our preconceptions, it shows a reflection of ourselves first. It truly shows us who we are. The fact that I sometimes have jumped into thinking the worst about someone in my head in a scenario where I'm already premeditating an argument, let's say, before it's even happened. I mean, essentially what happens for anxiety for most people. We think about the worst situations before it's even happened. That is a reflection of me. And it's quite harsh. It's a quite harsh reality to come into concept with, because, you know, we want to blame the outside. We want to blame it on other people, but so-and-so is like this, and this situation is just so hard for me to come by, etc. And we put all these beliefs in, and reasons, and blame. But there's some responsibility to take place in the sense of, but what are we assuming first? The free will and choice to assume first is a reflection of who we are, because we can choose differently. We can avoid and instead imagine a lovely conversation with that person. Even if they did a number of things, you can shift internally. What does that say about you as a person? Now, if you had the best self-concept, the strongest one, where you stayed unmoved whilst the world was moving frantically around you, and it's rapidly moving, everything is always changing, but if you stayed still, held your ground in who you are, but I don't even mean who you're identifying as, who you are at the root core of consciousness, at the root core of self, that is the very foundation that you should be building other desires, other identities on top of. Because that foundation should not move. It is the most stable, it should be the most stable thing in your experience, in your life. So then when you do build upon it, when you add things you want to experience and use your imagination to experience the best parts, it makes it so much easier. It makes it more realistic, more believable, more natural, I think is the right word. It makes it way more natural, especially when you do it more frequently, and then you see the results change in your reflected reality. You see the reflections, you start to build up those beliefs, and then it's when the good becomes on autopilot mode. And that's what self-concept does to you. We're always on pretty much autopilot mode to a certain extent when we're not always consciously aware of things. Sometimes we get lost in, well, not always lost, but we get into the mire, and it can be a good thing because you don't want to be consciously aware of every single thing you do. Otherwise it gets exhausting, and you don't want to always just know that you're the player of the game. You also want to play the character and actually be the character, right? And it's a nice balance of flickering between the two, like a light switch. And so you want to make sure that your character, when it's on autopilot, is thinking in favorable things and has a self-concept that is very favorable to the experiences you want to play in the game. You don't want to have that autopilot be anxious and be in a negative state all the time, because then when you try to play out experiences that you would like, especially if it's something you would like to change, that makes it incredibly hard and much more resistant. So truly, focus on self-concept above all else. And it's a habitual discipline, personally, right now, that I believe. It's something that I think you can't do it for a few days and then stop. It has to be something that is so habitual that it's just second to nature. It's even when you don't feel like it, no matter how you're feeling, whether you feel motivated to do your routine or techniques or whatever, you do it anyway because it's muscle memory. I think that's when you can utilize your physical body, your physical experiences, to just turn it into muscle memory and make the most of it. Chasing manifestations and desires outside of you, so you're affirming for a certain event to happen, does create attachment, unless you can do it with non-attachment, but that's from knowing who you are as self. But when you are doing so, I'm not to say that it will not work. I've experienced it myself, but is it sustainable? No, because you're always chasing the leaf of a plant rather than focusing on the roots that it stems from. And that's a powerful analogy, because that is essentially you as part of the primordial reality, as part of this lucid dream. You are the consciousness dreaming, as Joey Lott says. And it's knowing that, have a balance, enjoy the game, enjoy the dream, play it out, live your stories. But you have to have some sort of a discipline to build that self-concept, but not only build it, maintain it also. There's a car coming. And when you maintain it, it's not going to be as strenuous or arguably tedious than if you were to build it. It will just be like watering a plant every day. Just something that takes a few minutes. I know Eric from The Power of I Am, he has a mantra that he sort of uses in every single video, but he says it every morning. I have something similar. I also practice memento mori, so I journal every night, and I write a few affirmations, self-concept wise. And I'm not saying you have to do those things. And I'm not saying you have to do it exactly the way I'm doing it. It's different for everyone. But what I am saying is that there is a necessity to have some sort of a... And I've said this in one of my videos, Rehearse to Manifest. It's like in Inception, and I love this analogy. I thought I'm quite proud of it. So if you've watched Inception, then you would know the main character that Leonardo DiCaprio plays. He has a spinning top, and he uses it to know if he's in a dream or not. And if it keeps spinning, he's in a dream, and if it stops and collapses, then he's in the real world. But it's that object he uses as like a little reminder that grounds him into his reality. It's essentially finding your I don't know what the right word is, but your little spinning top, your object, to ground you into your self-concept and into your root, and to remind you of who you are. You do this enough times to the point where you're just watering your plants, watering your roots. Then you have the energy, the space to create and cultivate desirable experiences in your life, and it will be at ease. You will not be as attached because you know who you are. It will come in patience, it will come with the right time. You would have already experienced it within, and it's just a matter of when and how, and you leave that to the divine, so to speak, and it will reflect on who you are being, not necessarily what you are doing. So at first, if you're not used to believing in your self-concept, it will feel like you're doing it outside of you and you're relying on these techniques. But really try and shift the focus that you are doing it, and feeling helps when you feel positive in your own favorable way. Really feel and understand to get to know who you are. Try and do that as much as possible, and then it will just become so much more easier to maintain. It's getting that foundation. Building a house isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world, but once it's built, it's home. And that's what I mean when I say by watering the plants every day. You're just maintaining it. You're setting your bed up after you've woken up, or you're just cleaning the carpet. It's just house maintenance, home maintenance for your soul, and it's a great idea. I think it's very necessary, and I think that's essentially what all religions, cultures, traditions have made their own way. It's not necessarily the dogma of following them for the sake of it. It's understanding what the essence is in by doing them. Get a hold of that essence and find your own creative way of bringing it out and applying it to your life, whatever technique or routine you do, as long as it's not harmful to other people, of course. And cultivate yourself as a plant, a flower that's ready, is ready, was ready, and is going to be ready to blossom, because time is an interesting, infinite concept, but maybe for another video. I hope this video was very useful. I hope it helped. And I'd like to end it with my disclaimer that I am by no means claiming to be knowledgeable in everything, except that I am in the humble pursuit of wisdom. If you'd like to work with me, all my links are in my description. Feel free to comment questions as well in the comment section. Engage with each other, share knowledge, and find your own way to what you define wisdom to be.